high school graduates than any other entity in Maryland at this point. Higher, in particular, HBI institutions. The reason I say that is because we are finding that many of the students that we are that are entering our program, quite frankly, need remediation. These students are coming with fairly high GPAs, and if you look at their GPAs, you would think that they are, and I think you alluded to this, that they should be successful. They are not. So we're expending a lot of resources trying to help remediate a lot of these young people coming in. Now, when I say that, people say, well, you're criticizing the Baltimore City High Schools. No, I'm not criticizing the Baltimore City High Schools, but we're going to have to be very candid and very honest about some of the conditions that face us in this city, but also in the state of Maryland. And while Maryland ranks #1 in terms of public education, you look at the graduation rate of Baltimore City High Schools, and they're right near, in terms of the lowest, in terms of having one of the lowest graduation rates in the nation. The disparities are telling, are very telling. It has to do with if we expect our kids to work effectively and enter and work effectively in the workforce and the economy in the state of Maryland, we have to look at those disparities because they are very telling. As I was talking to someone earlier today, if we don't invest in education on the front end, we're going to pay on the other end because these kids are going to drop out, engage in all kinds of things that we don't want to see them in, all kind of activities, etc. So I think it's important that we do that. Now, let me just talk about the connection, as you alluded to earlier, about the connection between higher education and the K-12. We oversee 2 charter schools. One is the Rosemont Elementary Middle School. The other one is the Coppin High School Academy. These young people are coming from the same environments, if you look at the data, if you will, the same kind of environments where other kids are coming from who are failing. So what is this making the difference? Is it just Coppin? Well, that's part of it, obviously. As president, I'm going to say yes. Of course it's part of Coppin. But it's more than that. You know, my mother taught school for 50 years, and a lot of it has to be paying attention to the needs of the students, making sure that we are addressing the needs of the students. And yes, I will come out and say it, we're going to have to look at what's going on in the home life, etc. These kinds of things. That's not blaming anybody. I know Bill Cosby came to Baltimore, he caught hell, excuse my language, for criticizing families, those kinds of things. I'm not going to do that, but I will say it's going to be a comprehensive effort that we need to address the needs of these students. These students are learning because of increased attention to their overall needs, their social needs, their intellectual needs, their psychological needs, if you will, the needs, the nurturing, if you will. A lot of it is old-fashioned nurturing, those kinds of things, and we've proven that we're very successful. These two schools now are scoring at the top of their competitors in the state of Maryland, or with the top of their competitors in the state of Maryland, white, black, whatever. That's instructive to say that HBCUs, or Coppin in this case, is able to do that. Something else that we need to be aware of is that, at Coppin at least, is that more than 85% of our students are Pell eligible. So they have significant economic challenges. I was talking to President Morgan earlier. We were talking earlier at some point about the number of students that we have lost this year because they were not able to pay their bills. And yes, they are Pell eligible for Coppin, but there's so many students that we lose because they can't pay their bill. Now, people joke, and Dr. Morgan and I talk about, we want to keep the competitiveness on the basketball court. He has pledged to beat me, and I pledged to beat him on the basketball court. But one thing we have in common is that we say this is larger than Morgan and Bowie and Eastern Shore and Coppin. This is much larger. We're competing with other entities out there. Let me give you an example. Is that I won't call the name of the campuses because I know this, we're televising this, and behind the closed doors I will. Our competition is more and more with entities in Baltimore, other colleges and universities in Baltimore. Is that in some cases they were able to give minority students, the top minority students, full scholarships. And we are losing. I was on the campus a couple of weeks ago with this institution, and I saw 2 of our students who had transferred from Coppin to that institution. I said, what happened? They said, well, they gave us a full ride. And so I raised that because we're going to have to look at resources. I was told not to focus on resources today, but I have to. I don't think there's any one of us who cannot afford to talk about their resources because it's a critical area. As we talk about the needs of Coppin and other HBCUs, and again, I don't want to generalize, let me just talk about Coppin, is that we have one of the lowest graduation rates around in the nation. You see that in the paper, no matter what happens, you always see that. congratulate Black Caucus and others are beginning to do that. I know Arnie Duncan is looking at that too. But we can't say one size fits all as well. You can't do that because there's so many variables there. I'm qualified by Dr. Wilson to just a little bit. I don't disagree with him at all. But I do know that there are many talented African-American students who are choosing to go to HBCUs. That is their number one choice, to go to HBCUs. Many of them do not